back again. This has been such a huge, there's been such a great response to the video we put up yesterday on the Idris map, this map that shows much older Mecca, much further north, up in where we know Ur used to be, or one of the Urs, where the Edessa comes from, and also halfway between Edessa and Haran. So we're now going to go, and what I said at the very end of our talk yesterday, I asked people to write their comments, and to do so at the bottom, the comment section that is there, and lots of you have written your comments. Over 21,000 of you viewed the video already, and that's really quite a substantial number in one day on a topic that's quite academic and not entertaining. So it's terrific that you have responded. Thank you for that. I have now Mel come back again. It's in the evening for him. It's still in the afternoon for us here in the United States. And I've asked Mel to answer some of the questions, some of the burning questions that are coming out, because you are throwing questions at Mel. And that's why he's made himself disposed to help you out, to bring out these difficulties. This is the peer review that we've been talking about. We needed to get you peers to throw things at him, to make sure that he gets the references right, to make sure that he also gets his dates right, and make sure that he gets his interpretation of those references and those dates. So, Mel, are you there?
I am, Jay. Thanks for inviting me back.
Terrific. Okay. Now, what I want to do, Mel, I want to look at some of these questions. I will be asking you the questions. I think you have them in front of you now, so these won't be questions that you're not aware of. In fact, you sent these questions to me. And I want to, one of the things that's been coming up, a number of people have been asking what that map, let's take a look at that map. Explain that map a little bit more, because first of all, it's in English. How could there be a map written in the 12th century by an Arab in English? Can you help us with that one? Yeah,
so the map, as we know, is called the Al-Idrisi map from the 12th century, but obviously it's written in English. A kind viewer sent me an email today just to inform me a little bit more of the history of the map, because in terms of the information that is available on the internet, it's very sparse. So subsequently, what I've found is there was a scholar called Conrad Miller in the early 1920s, and he took the map, and I think he spent years making a copy of it, and he changed the Arabic to English. So apart from changing it to English, he was replicating it exactly as it was originally. Now,
what we're looking at, and here, let's just show it. Here's the map. There are the English reference points. And then what he has done, he's just taken the Arabic, translated it in English so that we can read it. That's all it is. But this is not, that doesn't in any way eradicate the authority or the credibility of the map. It's just readable.
Yeah. So it's not as if the map has been created out of thin air. It's just simply a copy. Obviously, I would prefer that we're talking about the original one, but the difficulty with it would be that it's in Arabic writing. I think the other thing I would point out as well is that people have said, okay, well, the map does say Mecca way up in the top part, which would be in the south.
As we remember for those, just want to remind you, it's looking as if from space, looking down from the North Pole. So look and assume that you're coming from the top of the globe, looking down onto it.
So yes, he does put Mecca and label it Mecca in exactly where you'd expect it in terms of the Hijaz. But the point is that he centers the map on the area called Haran, which actually, even though it looks a tiny little point on the map, it's actually a huge valley, which includes Ur and includes the old Mecca right there in the middle. But obviously, it would be like a tiny little dot if you were to try and label it on the map. So that's not possible. That's why in the map it just says Haran. And I was actually, before this video, I was actually having a look on Google Earth to see the terrain. And it's incredible, the terrain, because you have massive mountains on either side and this lovely plain in the middle. And it fits nicely with the descriptions in terms of, you know, being in a valley between mountains. So it's really, it certainly looks
even
like
Mecca.
That.
Remember what we remind you. I just want to remind readers, the only place that you're going to find Mecca referred to in the Quran is in chapter 48, verse 24, that it's in a valley. If you look at Mecca today, it's not in a valley. There are mountains, but they're quite a ways away. They're a few kilometers away. They're not right there where the Kaaba is. So there's not a
Yeah.
valley there, and that would not support Mecca. So it's fascinating you brought this up. We've now found a place that fits that.
I wanted to add another detail. You know, the last day you asked me about what does the word Mecca mean, and I suggested one meaning that I've heard, which is low ground. And there was a Jewish viewer that took a look at that word, and he gave a suggestion from Hebrew, and he suggested that the word may come from a word which means to strike. And so he suggested it's got to do with a heel being struck on the ground and then water emerging. In this, you know, if you think of the story of Hagar and Ishmael, they strike the ground and then the water emerges. I think it might have been the angel in the story that strikes the ground. So that's maybe another possibility, and it's quite a good possibility in terms of the meaning of Mecca. So I just wanted to include that just in case people think, oh, you've missed the other meaning. So that's one other possible meaning. I think it's an interesting one. It may well be true, but doesn't necessarily contradict the other possibility either.
Okay, now here's another question from Asif Maki. He says this: so the traditional Islamic story came after the 12th century Idris map. Is that what you're suggesting?
No. So I believe the new Islamic tradition happened at the beginning of the Abbasids. So we're talking about the 750s onwards.
So 8th century, 9th century.
8th century, 9th century. And essentially, Ur is still part of the folklore, the memory of the people. So it's still very important. Like even today, people are visiting this site and are conscious of the fact that it's the birthplace of Abraham. So that memory never went away. I've had a number of emails from Kurds who are really excited about the material that we're doing because they are conscious of all of this material. And the Turks are not happy with this material going out because they want to suppress this material because it's quite embarrassing to the Turks. But the Kurds are very conscious of this connection with Abraham in their town. And the Kurds are not happy with the new name that the Turks gave to the town because it hides its earlier name, which was Urfa. They added Shanli Urfa, which means glorious Urfa. But, looking at it from the outside, we can't see its connection with Ur from way back in the past. But they're very conscious. So it's the great thing about traditions is that if you're dealing with a local tradition, it's amazing how long people remember the details of a story. And this is one of the problems with the Hadiths, if I can jump to something else. If we look at
before you do that, just so people are clear, it's not that somehow that the traditions are, or this person who wrote this map, Idris, who is from the 12th century, he is just reflecting that folklore that's still there. He's reflecting that. Obviously, the Abbasids have now chosen Mecca way down in the Hijaz, but these you cannot get rid of these traditions that's still floating around. So that's what you're saying, and this map reflects that also.
Yeah, it's essentially saying that this place is still vital, still very important to Muslims because it's the birthplace. Essentially, it's the birthplace of Islam. If you believe that Abraham was the father of the three great religions, then obviously Abraham is the father of Islam from a Muslim point of view, and that's why it's right smack in the center. So that's
three great
still
religions.
there.
You're talking about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Yeah.
Okay, you wanted to say something about the Hadith. Go ahead.
So, I was making the point how local traditions tend to retain memory for centuries. Very reliable, actually, in most cases. But if we think about the later tradition of Islam, it's all based on hadiths written by people in the wrong location. So they're written by people in eastern parts of Iran, Afghanistan, and so on, Kyrgyzstan. These are the wrong places to be writing records of what Muhammad said, because they don't have the local knowledge. So in that context, when stories are supposedly from oral memory, that creates lots of possible areas of confusion. People don't know the local geography, they get things confused, and things get invented, and there's no check there, because if the stories were written where it all happened originally, I think you'd have much more reliable information. And that's part of the explanation for why hadiths are so different to those early sources from the 7th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This Asif Maki goes on to say, he says, referring to the Chinese reports that you introduced, and he says these Chinese reports make it even stronger. Why? Because the Chinese would not have any agenda. There'd be no reason for them to lie or to create or have a narrative that would purposely be in confrontation to that which they're referring to, and that because of the fact that they had been there. So he's saying that they would not lie due to suspicion with the documentation. And remember, Muhammad did say, seek knowledge even from China, or something of that sort. So it's
Yeah.
terrific to see that other people are resonating with what you're coming up with. Now, I'd like to, I remember, just so people are aware, whenever you're talking about the hadith, whenever you're talking about the tafsir and the tahriq and all these traditions are 9th and 10th century. They do come from the Abbasid period, in contradistinction to the Umayyad period that came earlier. And that's why there's a sublimation of the earlier Umayyad period. And there now is a new narrative. And this new narrative now wants to make sure that that Mecca is no longer up in the north, whether that is Petra, whether that is Ur, it is down in the south. And that's why all these narrations, these narrations, yes, were these compilations by al-Bukhari, when he took 600,000, brought it down to 7,000. That have to have that new narrative built into it. The other 98% they've thrown out. One of the questions that, a good question that's come up, and actually I like this question, and that is, you referred not to the one yesterday, in the video we had yesterday, but the one earlier, that this quote, you referred to this quotation by Jacob of Edessa, and in the Jacob of Edessa quotation, you referenced that these people from, these people who are facing towards the west in Iraq and who are facing towards the east in outside of Cairo are Muslims. So these Muslims pray towards the west and the east, whereas they should be praying towards the south. This is dated to 688. Now we know that according to the earliest tradition for the word Muslim, that was introduced on the Dome of the Rock in 691. This predates that reference. So is that not a problem? Is that not a contradiction as far as dating is concerned?
Yeah, so I suppose the issue here is the fact that a lot of these words are often translated in a conventional manner. So another example of this would be Tayaye is often translated by Robert Hoyland as simply Arab, which isn't a literal translation. So this word Magreye is more like the word Hagarine. So it doesn't have a religious connotation. It's more to do with the fact that they view themselves as descendants from Hagar and Ishmael. And so by translating it as Muslim, it's kind of a loaded term. It's misleading. Probably a better term would be maybe Abrahamist or Hagarine, or even Saracen would be a better term. But
okay, so it's not Muslim in the original text. In the same token, the map is Arabic. Whereas we're reading it in English. In the same token, the reference, and unfortunately, we put the word Muslim in there when we shouldn't have. It should be Maghreb. But the word would have been what, Maghreb in Syriac.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific.
Exactly.
All right, here comes another question, and this is probably one that you may want to take a little bit more time to unpack, and that is concerning your references of the north, putting Mecca up in the north. Does that not also confront Dan Gibson's reference to Mecca being in Petra? And he looks at the 5 stages of the Hajj in Petra and shows that every one of those 5 stages corresponds with the same 5 stages we have in Mecca. In fact, even better, because Al-Zaraqi in the 9th century refers to the dimensions of the Kaaba, and the Kaaba that he's referring to, the dimensions exactly fit the Petran Kaaba, not the Meccan Kaaba, or the mountains between the Safa and Marwa, where Hagar is looking for water for her son Ishmael, that she runs back and forth between these 2 mountains. If you look in Mecca, there aren't mountains, they're just rocks. The mountains are in Petra. What are you going to do with this conflict? Is your theory in conflict with Dan Gibson's or not?
Not at all. So, in a previous video, I explained the idea that the new Mecca of the Hijaz is a conflation of lots of different ideas brought together. So if we think back of Jacob of Edessa, he tells us that they prayed towards a Qibla, or prayed in the Qibla direction towards a Kaaba. He doesn't mention the location. And then the 741 source just mentions Mecca as being the birthplace of Abraham. So these are definitely separate places. Now, it could be possible that Petra also was given the name Mecca at some point, don't know when exactly. That could be an area that Dan Gibson might be able to tell us when
Can
exactly
I
he got
help
the
you
name
here?
Mecca.
Actually, that's not what
Yeah,
Dan is saying. He's not saying that the Mecca, the word Mecca comes from Petra. He is
yeah,
saying that the stages of the Hajj come from Petra. So that
yeah,
would have no difficulty whatsoever. It looks like
yeah,
that in Petra, the Nabateans who give us the language and also give us the name for the name God, the God of Islam as well. Also the traditions of the sanctuary, the traditions of these routines, these 5 different stages that they now do today. Those were preceded and those existed in Petra. So this does not at all confront your notion that
yeah.
the word Mecca or even the place called Mecca is in Petra. I've never heard Dan say anywhere in any of his videos that the word itself was Mecca. You're
Okay.
finding where
Well,
the word
so
itself is Mecca, and that's what gets me more
yeah,
excited because
yeah,
you're putting you're in some ways those who put the tradition together, if and that's why it's fascinating because well those who put the tradition together they have to find a place that reproduces where the remember what Dan says. He says that the black stone is the key here. When Ibn Zubair destroyed Petra and fled Petra in 687, he took the black stone with him. And for all the Nabateans and all the Arabs, wherever the black stone was, there was the presence of God. So by taking it
yeah,
out of Petra, he took the presence of God out of Petra and he took it down to the south. Now, when the Abbasids come, because they were the ones that support Ibn Zubair, remember it's the Abbasids who were the ones that support him against the Umayyads. They then choose Mecca as the new Petra. They got to replace all these different stages of the Hajj. And so they then introduced the black stone there. And it's not that they intentionally did it, but it could be very well that the pilgrims just kept on following where the black stone was. And so they kept on coming
yeah,
to Mecca. So by virtue of that, it then had to reproduce what was already earlier. Now, what you're saying is when the Abbasids then take over this and destroy the Umayyads and then take over power, they now have the sanctuary, the new sanctuary. They've got to give credibility to that new sanctuary, and they've got to put it with history. So what do? They take the name that was up in Ur, where Abraham's birthplace was, and they then take that name and reproduce it down in the south.
yeah,
That's why that line that you showed is going straight
yeah,
down.
yeah.
It's almost like a direct line.
So just to make it really clear for people then, so what I'm suggesting is the Abbasids took the name. I'm not suggesting that Muhammad was even ever in this place called Mecca. He may not have been there. He didn't necessarily have visions there. He wasn't necessarily in a cave there, though there is a cave in Ur, which might be where that part of the story came from. But wherever, as you say, the Kaaba was, that's the focal point. And if we think back to the connection between it and the Jewish religion, there's quite an interesting connection because the Jews call their festivals Hag, which in Arabic is Hajj. And there's a particular festival to do with the Festival of Booths, where they put up a tent and that becomes their focal point. And in fact, they do circumambulations on the 7th day. They do 7 of them, which is
The
exactly
exact
like
same
what you have.
7 days that we have it with the Hajj.
But the key thing is that was a mobile tent. So that tent could easily be moved to wherever you wanted to put it. So the idea of our idea nowadays is that the focal point must be fixed. But back in those days, it may not have been so concrete. It could have been more fluid. It's exactly like what you said. It's wherever the black stone is. That's what's key. So you follow wherever the black stone is.
Okay. Now, could you help me? And we're going to do a whole. In fact, I'm going to do a whole video just on the black stone. I might call you in to help me with that. The researcher on our Fander team has just done a great study on Elagabalus. We need to look at Elagabalus and see where the black stone came from. It looks like the black stone has existed since the 2nd century AD, and there might be even references to even earlier to the 2nd century BC. So it's been around a long time. It was as a stone. At some point, it was broken up into about 8 pieces now, so small pieces today. Listen, God bless you. Thanks so much. You're doing what we need to do. And what I love about you, Mel, is you're actually paying attention to what the people are responding to. And you're taking them seriously. You're not just sloughing them off or throwing them out or disputing with them. You're actually trying to dig down and find out what they're saying, go back and see if that's true. You did a great job by looking at the map here and understanding that, yeah, that's true. It is in English, but there's a reason for that. That's so you can read it. On the same token, you went back and you looked and you asked about whether or not that the word the word is Muslim, and you said no, it is Muslim. We shouldn't have put Muslim there. When we translate, we should keep the name that it was originally there, Maghreb. And so you've done the same thing in both of these. So thank you for that. There'll be other questions that come up. We'll probably do one. One thing I'd like to do, probably the next video, what you need and I do is I want you to put a timeline. I want you just to stick these different dates and show you so we can see on a timeline visually why these dates are significant in the story that you're talking about. But for now, God bless you. Thank you for being on board. This is then Mel and Jay here talking about the Idris map and trying to explain it a little bit better. Over and out.